First, let's discuss the collar. This is the inner part.
The collar
and this is
has
the
a
outer
front
part.
and back, so I have drawn the inner part as a whole.
Draw the front part of the collar here, and for the back piece, connect this pointed seam and draw it at the back. Draw the other piece on the reverse side. If you prefer, you can also use this method to draw the outer part together. But here I'm drawing in sections. The main reason for doing this is that my fabric has a pattern. I want the pattern to appear correctly on both the front and back.
Because if I draw everything together, like if the front pattern is correct, from the back, the collar's pattern is reversed. It's upside down.
If your collar is made of solid color fabric, then this problem doesn't occur.
You can draw everything together. Or if you don't mind the pattern being upside down, you can draw it together as well. Another point is that if we draw it together, this back position will be a bit small. We leave a 5mm seam for cutting.
Finally, the seam area in this position may lack a small corner.
This is not an issue. When we get to this stage, we will also need to trim the seams.
Finally, we need to create 4 marking points on the outer layer. The positions of the marking points are shown on the drawing. There are 2 marking points on the front collar and 2 on the back collar. We need to draw them on the fabric.
Next, we align the collar front and back and sew at the pointed seam.
If your outer fabric is all made together, like a ceremonial cloth,
then we can skip this step.
After the gathering is done, we separate the sewing position to either side. The outer fabric of the collar is processed like this, and then we add some lace.
The lace begins and ends here, fitting within the sewing line. At the start and end of the lace, we can fold it slightly inward by a few millimeters. You can also use a little glue to secure the small fold.
This way, when we finish and turn it to the front, the edges of the lace will be neat. Note that both the start and end of the lace are within this sewing area, closely adhering to the edge of the sewing line.
Here I'm sewing the lace while manually pushing it forward a bit to create a fold.
This depends on your personal preference. You can also fold the lace separately. Then sew along the bottom seam as you move upwards. Please note that we are currently working on the front side of the collar for this lace measurement step.
Next, at the lower point, the right side is for sewing, while the left side shows the exposed lace.
So if everyone wants the lace to show a bit more, you should leave less fabric in the seam.
If you want less lace to show, then leave more fabric in the seam.
The width of the lace here is approximately 1.2 centimeters. Then I sewed a seam that's about 3 to 4 centimeters long.
The remaining part is what is visible on the outside as the finished product. We need to stop about 1 centimeter before the sewing line at the end of the lane. Here, we need to cut off the excess. We still need to leave some for folding it back. Just fold it up a bit like we did at the beginning to tidy up the raw edge. Check the seams. Both sides have no decorative edges.
The places where our lace begins and ends are within the seam lines on both sides.
Then the back area is also positioned right on the seam line.
Next, we will address the sleeve cap position on both the front and back pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4. There are a total of 4 positions Here, like I will this. demonstrate using one of the positions. We handle these 4 positions using the same method.
Here, I'm using this thinner ironing cloth.
It's fine if you don't have an ironing cloth. You can just use regular fabric. You can use fabric that is similar to this tablecloth. The only difference is that using an ironing cloth will make it fit a little they all better. look quite similar on the surface. Here, we consider the smooth, non-sticky side of the pressed fabric as the front. Then, place it opposite the front of our tablecloth. I suggest cutting a larger piece of the pressed fabric
first. We will do the trimming
just
later.
like I did. Otherwise, when we fold the clear line along the edge later,
it can easily get stuck in the hole under the presser foot.
After folding along the curve, we trim it a bit and sew. Since the curve here is quite large, I will use the pinking shears. If you don't have pinking shears, just use regular scissors to make some notches. This is how it looks after trimming.
Then we flip this cloth under the scale up.
You can tidy up the edges and give them a quick iron. Be aware that if you're using this ironing scale,
when you iron, avoid ironing too far inward. We only iron this small part of the crease.
Otherwise, if you iron it on the inside,
this adhesive will stick to the cloth.
We still need to trim it after finishing the seam later. After arranging it, the front looks like this.
This area has been cleaned. Then we fold a marked line along the edge to secure it.
This step is quite simple, so we have kept the measuring cloths at both the front and back.
It will be slightly easier to fold. It's not that easy, Kaboo.
If you completely trim the weighing fabric from the start,
then this position is very prone to sinking.
Now that we've finished folding here, we turn it to the
reverse side. Trim off the
side.
excess fabric.
Trimming to this extent is sufficient. Then, since I'm using a pressing scale
For this step, I will press it again.
After pressing,
the pressing scale and the tablecloth become one. If you are using this cotton fabric, it does have a slight curl, but from the front,
actually, it's completely invisible.
Then we use the same method. Let's take care of the other 3 positions.
Next, we will make folds at these 3 positions. This particular edge.
Then the 2 edges at the top.
Here, we will still perform a double fold.
It's 2 millimeters from the sewing line on each side. Fold a gathering line.
The stitch spacing for the gathering line, then do not backstitch at either end. Then we tighten both bottom threads simultaneously.
Take out this fold.
Try to concentrate the folded pieces in a central position. Leave space at both ends, the front and back pieces. Then there are marked identical points on the collar. For example, this front collar has 2 marked points on this side. Dimensions after folding the front piece here. This dimension refers to the position between the 2 marker points on the front neckline. The back piece also has marker points. The dimensions of the back piece after folding. This is the dimension from this marker point to the edge for sewing. Here, let's first stitch the position of the front neckline to this front piece. The front sides should be facing each other.
Align the marked point at the front with the edge of the fabric underneath.
Sew along the folds at the top and bottom. The position of the other marked point should align with the edge of the fabric beneath it. Folded marking point, you can finish by making 2 finishing stitches. After folding, turn it over to the front. Check if there are any issues with the lace stitching position. If there are no issues,
let's remove the draft line we just created.
Next, we will stitch the back neck and this back piece.
Make sure the top and bottom edges are aligned.
The other piece is the same. First, ensure its position is correct.
Then we stitch it together face to face.
I'll start by stitching this piece this way. They are face to face. The positions of the marked points align with the bottom edge.
Sew along the vertical seams, so the end position for this is at the edge.
Just align the seams at the edge, sewing the upper and lower parts. After folding, check it by turning it to the front. If everything is fine, remove the folding line at this spot. There's also a back piece. Everyone just needs to repeat this method and do it again. After folding the front and back pieces,
then we need to fold the inner collar.
Facing the front, fold the collar up in a circle from here to come down. Pay attention to the starting and ending points.
We fold the seam upward like this.
Along the edge of the stitching line, the crease and the location where the skirt hem is joined are perfectly aligned. After folding, we will follow the position we just discussed.
Fold it around once.
Also the position of this empty section on the collar. Be careful when folding this part.
It's because this part is stitched with the lower half, so we can't fold to this stitched area.
We are a little bit away from it.
About 3 or 4 millimeters.
This end is also about 3 or 4 millimeters.
If you are confident, you can also move a little closer to it. It's fine to be right next to its edge.
That is to say, just to be on the safe side. We're about 3 to 4 millimeters away from it. The difference here is simply in when we use the long needle technique. We just need to sew 1 or 2 more stitches. The symmetrical side is also done using the method I just mentioned. Leave a little space at the front. Then we will side stitch it together with the lining. Then I'll start side stitching from around the neckline. When I position it, the outer part should face upwards. The inner part is at the bottom. Remember the beginning and end points. The stitching line on the bottom edge of the inner part. They all need to be folded inward slightly. Let's take a look after folding it. Starting and ending points.
The crease positions are perfectly aligned.
Now let's fold the sides at this position. I've already mentioned the position of the side seams. We can keep the front side facing up.
Fold along the seam line of the front side.
The beginning and ending sections. Both are positioned away from the edge where they connect with the front. Leave a small gap, about 3 or 4 millimeters. This is how it looks after folding. Then at the same spot on the other side, we'll also fold the seam using this method. This is how it looks after folding this side.
Then let's trim the sewing position a bit.
This seam should only be trimmed.
This is the part we just folded.
The area that hasn't been folded yet.
You shouldn't trim that.
There are no scissors for lace. Simply use regular scissors to make some cuts. You also need to trim around the neckline. Next, we need to turn it inside out from the neckline of the front piece. Move towards the back piece. Pinch the fabric at the bottom edge of the back piece. Pull it over here, pull it a little closer. Then we can switch to using our hands. Don't continue using the hemostatic forceps.
It's easy to tear. Gently pull it out with your hand.
Use the same method on the other side.
Turn it over.
Then, at the right angle of the opening on the back side, use tweezers to assist in organizing it. Once it's taken care of, the front and back positions inside.
It's all empty.
In this context,
we will fold it inwards along the sewing line.
Use the long stitching technique to attach it to the outer part. Sew them together. The position at the back is the same. Fold inwards along the sewing line. Sew using the long needle method. If you don't want to use the long needle method,
just wrap these areas well.
Or use that water-resistant double-sided
After
tape.
securing it,
stitch the side label of the collar directly.
You can also secure it.
If you're using the long needle
try
technique,
to hide the thread ends inside.
And since the stitching area has a significant curve, you can sew along this bottom edge on the inside.
Make some notches in it.
Be careful not to cut the notches too deep. Originally, this seam is about 5 millimeters.
You can just cut in by 3 millimeters.
Then we use the long needle technique. A stitch is sewn at the surface
at the location with stitches.
One stitch is sewn into the inner part to create the seam at the location of this crease.
Repeat this step.
We take the open position on the 3 bottom edges. Sew it using the long needle method.
We sew it into a smooth circle. Fold it slightly. That's it.
It looks like this once everything is sewn.
Then we turn it to the front. If you want to make this edge flatter, just go along the edge, fold the marking line.
Then we stitch these 2 positions together with the front sides facing each other. This side is also stitched together with the front sides facing each other. We just folded these two lines at the correct Spread it apart position. To both sides. You can use an iron to smooth it out for a neater finish. Now the top part is finished. Then we will piece together another section. Regarding the section being pieced together below, we will fold the bottom edge along the style line. Then fold a guiding line to secure it.
I cut it based on the grid.
So I didn't draw a reference line. Everyone should draw their own reference line.
Then add 5 millimeters reference cuts around it.
Then fold the bottom edge in at this position along the style line.
Then fold a marking line to secure it.
It corresponds to the edge above.
We need to tighten the folds slightly.
I'll reinforce the style line on this edge.
This is a 5 millimeter guideline.
We are on either side of this guideline. Fold a fold line 2 millimeters from each side. For the line spacing, use a distance of 4. Do not backstitch at both ends. Then we pull both bottom lines tight at the same time. Remove the paper material. One side feels tight and is difficult. Then switch to pulling the two bottom lines on the other side.
The size after pulling and folding matches the size of the upper bottom edge. We adjust the density of the pleats according to this size.
After making the adjustments,
we then seam the bottom edge of the upper part to the front side of the pleated section we just completed.
Sew along the upper and lower stitching lines. After finishing, we check for any issues. If there are no problems, just remove this draw line. Then draw a line on the front side. Note that the design is towards the collar. Then we will address the openings at the back on both sides. Here, we will fold directly along the style line. Both sides are the same.
Then, as I do, sew up from the bottom edge.
This side uses 5 millimeters thread. Go around to the collar side and sew with 1 millimeter thread. Then switch back to 5 millimeters thread on the right side. Finally, sew a hidden button or Velcro. The garment is finished.